Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is a 3-part series from the wonderful mind of Bleeding Dagger. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share, it really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. And so, let's get into part 1 of the new series entitled I'm an Archaeologist, and I am straight up not having a good time. Part 1. Let's get straight into that. I realise how fortunate I am to have fallen in love with a random class I took in first year to make up points. 4 years later, and I'm a postgraduate archaeology student that can distinguish ceramic assemblages in my sleep. That being said, I've always preferred the theoretical side of the discipline. I am, unapologetically, an armchair academic. So while my classmates were volunteering to go on digs, I would spend the time reading every piece of interesting research published. This meant I had considerably less practical experience, and when one of our lecturers called for volunteers on a site he would be conducting a HIA for, I begrudgingly put up my hand to offer my inadequate services. 3 weeks later, I was climbing into our lecturer's minivan for 3 days of excruciating field surveying. Our posse consisted of myself, 4 honours classmates, Professor Hughes, an overly enthusiastic undergrad, and Professor Hughes PhD student. The 8 of us were armed with our camping gear, hiking boots and notebooks, and despite hating the outdoors, I was excited about 72 hours of no self-service away from the urban rat race. "What's the HIA for, Grant?" Jess piped up next to me. She was absent-mindedly running her hands through her short black hair. I was surprised when I heard she had volunteered too. Her thesis, like mine, was entirely desktop-based, and she seemed to dislike physical exertion as much as I did. I suspected her reasoning for volunteering was the same as mine, and while I was grateful for a partner in misery, I prayed to God she wasn't going to complain the entire trip. "The government wants to build a new mine. Now, apparently, there's quite a bit of coal there. It is Northern Free State after all, but a hiker reported having seen some rock art in one of the rock shelters a couple of kilometres into the Savannah pocket. We need to survey the area and make sure it wasn't a significant occupation site or harbouring anything deemed heritage," he responded, while keeping his eyes on the road. He was a young professor, no older than 30, which made him a hoot at the end of year parties. Lana was beaming at the word rock art, and this was her area of expertise. Her PhD dissertation was 300 glorious pages of sand rock panel iconography analysis. I've never been a fan of the actual art, but I've always enjoyed reading about the nitty-gritty legislative frameworks surrounding its protection, and this made me mildly interested to see it firsthand. The 8-hour drive seemed to pass in no time as we all dove into conversation about our current research, getting overly excited about the esoteric papers coming out of the country. If there were a single non-archaeologist in the car, they would have fallen asleep within the first 10 minutes. I could sense the undergrad, Aaron, feeling overwhelmed with the topic of the conversation. "Hey, you feeling okay?" I whispered under the loud conversation. His blue eyes widened as I crawled over to the front row seat next to him. "Yeah, just feeling like I'm out of my depth here," he whispered back. "Don't. You're at the best part of your career, the exciting chunk, where you get to discover what you're truly passionate about." "You think I'm cut out for this?" "I think you can mold yourself into any situation." His cheery demeanour returned as the conversation turned to lighter topics centred on faculty gossip. The first day was uneventful. We spent a solid 3 hours struggling to set up the tent and listening to Grant chuckle every time we groaned in frustration. He refused to help, insisting the task needed to be mastered by the next generation of archaeologists. After camp was set up, it was around midday and we decided to explore the landscape. It was composed of the usual brown grasses and scattered trees. The view was rather pretty, in a desktop screensaver sort of way. Aaron and I headed 2 kilometres north, while the others paired up and headed in different directions. After a few minutes, We stopped hearing their conversations as the sounds of nature took centre stage, the cheerful chirping of crickets and occasional scatter of a small rodent. I glanced over at a large butte in the distance and eternally groaned at tomorrow's hike up that dreadful structure. I could feel the scrapes on my shins and the peel of my skin under hours of the harsh African sun already. A brief study survey revealed nothing of interest. It seemed the area was unusually pristine and was ready to write a non-anthropogenic influence on my report and head home the next day. Aaron was chatting animatedly about how unrealistic Indiana Jones was, and I couldn't help but notice how cute he is when we halted in our step by a putrid smell. I don't know how to describe it other than the first year biology labs when we had to dissect a rat. By day 5, there was this smell of intestines in the air. It was much like that, but without the formaldehyde and much more rancid. Now, before you judge this next part, bear in mind that Aaron is white. I, however, am not, so you can imagine my dismay when I saw him instinctively follow the scent. By the time I had come to my senses and was running to grab him and drag him back to camp by the shirt, we found the source. A half-decayed cheetah lay on the grass with a swarm of flies buzzing around so loudly I thought I was developing a migraine. There was a moment of relief followed by a bone-chilling realization. We walked back to camp, neither of us saying a word. The carefree atmosphere long dissipated. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge what we saw because then we would have to ask ourselves, what the fuck managed to catch and mutilate but not eat an adult male carnivore? I'm an archaeologist, and I'm straight up not having a good time. Part 2. Let's get straight into that. The evening passed as it usually does in the field. Grant, Jess, Aaron, Lily, Lana and I were sitting around the fire, roasting some mini hot dogs, while Darren and Emma were wrapped around each other to the side. We all internally groaned when we had heard they would be coming on this trip together because, while they were great people, they had started dating earlier in the semester and violated our innocent eyes with their constant PDA on the regular. At some point in the evening, Jessie whipped out the card games and a bottle of gin, so that when Tuesday 7 a.m. came around, I was groggy and running on 5 hours of sleep. We had some scrambled eggs, packed some lunch for the day, and set off on our hike. The hike was excruciating, and the sun never let up once, the long grass making me itchy. I don't know if you guys know much about the South African biome, but there rarely is, if ever, shade in the savannah, especially when you're hiking upwards and the heat is on your back. We had to stop every hour or so for Lily to reapply sunblock. She was so pale, I was concerned every time she stepped outside. I suspected she'd be red for a while after this trip. Every cloud has a silver lining, and I knew that when I got home, I'd be in dresses all week to show off my new, toned calves. After several hours, we were all, with the exception of Professor Grant, a little winded. I swear that man is a love child of a mountain goat and a Duracell bunny. By 11:30 a.m, we decided to stop for lunch under a nearby tree. I was sitting next to Aaron. I'll admit, talking about my calves and picking up my chicken mayo sandwich, I saw Emma walk off, and I remembered that I should also pee before we leave. 5 minutes later, I was laughing at something funny Aaron had said when Emma came storming towards us. She punched Aaron in the arm and called him a perv. All conversation died down as we stared at each other in confusion. She was absolutely seething, and her blonde hair was stuck to her forehead with sweat beads clung. What did he do? I tried to stay calm, thinking he'd said something inappropriate earlier. He knows what he fucking did. She spat the words, never looking away from him. I gave a questioning look to him, but he mimicked my expression in an equally confused response. She let out an exasperated sigh. I was peeing, as one does, when Aaron walked up in front of me and grinned. I told him to fuck off because he was creeping me out, but he just kept grinning, and that's when I got really freaked out. Then he said something crude, and walked off. I was terrified and ran back, but he already beat me here. Darren, who seemed he was ready to fight Aaron 5 seconds ago, even looked confused. He placed his large palms on his girlfriend's shoulders and spoke as if he was talking to a child. He was here with Naya the whole time. They haven't moved since you left. She looked as if she was about to start up another cussing storm when she saw us nodding in agreement with Darren. Her face showed her anger, dissipated, replaced with fear. Realization finally crossed Grant's face. It's been really hot out, and you guys did drink a little last night. Are you remembering to stay hydrated as possible? There was a genuine concern in his voice. Aaron got up and offered her some of his water and an Advil. She took them both, looking at the ground with embarrassment. It's okay, he continued, lowering his voice to a whisper. The fact that he was so calm and collected right now really took me by surprise. I think you had a small hallucination. Do you want me to take you back to camp? She glanced up, the embarrassed blush finally leaving her face. No, I'm okay. I just need a little rest is all. That's a good idea. I wouldn't do something so weird, you know. He smirked a little. Besides, he lowered his voice again, that I had to strain to hear the next part. I'm kinda into Naya. Emma chuckled and gave me a smile. Logically, I knew he was just saying that to break the tension, but my cheeks burned red and I looked down in embarrassment. Take a break, okay? If you need us to stop, you let me know. Grant smiled reassuringly, and Darren ushered Emma out of the limelight, gesturing for her to sit on a large rock. Aaron sat down next to me, and the absurdity of the whole situation evoked an involuntary chuckle. He gave me an amused grin as he sipped his water. Hey, I whispered. I'm gonna pee. You wanna watch? He spurted some water out of his mouth in an attempt to stifle a laugh, and I winked before sauntering off. I returned to the group and everyone was sitting in a circle. Emma was smiling as Darren whispered a joke only they shared, and I was happy to see that she was doing better. Okay, Grant rose. Everyone make sure y'all have enough water. Go to the bathroom if you need to. Reapply your sunblock. Looking at you, Lily. Lily sighed exasperatedly. There's about an hour more before we get to the rock shelter. When we get there, Darren is going to photograph the site. Darren nodded, tossing the camera bag over his shoulder. Naya and Emma, y'all are my scribes. I saluted with my index and middle finger. Jesse and Lily, resketching of the rock panel. Lana, you'll do the context sheets. Cool, she grinned. And Aaron, try and learn as much as you can. Move between the postgraduates and ask them questions. Will do. He grinned excitedly. Grant nodded. All right. Be ready to leave in 5. After 10 minutes, we were all packed up and ready to move. The remaining portion of the hike was steep, made more difficult by the fact that I had gone to town on 3 packets of biltong during lunch. We arrived at the rock shelter and tossed our bags to the ground. I took a moment to appreciate the scenery. I'm including the picture Jess took. The actual rock art was nothing any of us had ever seen before. It was sand and appeared to be ochre finger paintings, but these depictions were never reported in any other papers I've read. I heard Grant and Lana gasp behind me. I don't know how to describe them to someone outside the discipline, so I'm going to transcribe my notes. Panel 1. Rock art appears sand. Paintings appear to be made out of red ochre and likely animal fat. Images are highly unusual. Every figure is duplicated like there's 2 of every person. Unlikely representative of a trance state because no animal features visible. Perhaps there was an upsurge of twins in the population. Hypothesis needs further reading. Panel 2. Depicts each duplicate in combat with the other, evident by spear-like weapons and offensive stance. Perhaps representative of the spiritual internal battle with oneself. Needs further reading. Panel 3. Violent massacre shows mutilated bodies of the population, painting elongated patterns to represent blood splatter. A long individual stands above the bodies. Individual appears sand too, unlikely representative of colonial bodies. The depictions of the massacre made me feel sick. I stumbled backwards and Darren righted me before returning to his photography. Aaron came to stand beside me. I'm sorry, I said weakly. Why are you apologizing? I'm supposed to help you learn, but I don't know what's going on here. I can't offer any insight. I've never read anything like this. He was about to place his arm around my neck when Grant chimed in. That's what makes it interesting. If you were to write a paper on this now, you could argue analysis of so many different kinds because this has never been seen before. I think it's symbolic of internal conflict. Someone else may take it literally. Substantiate your argument well enough and it could be anything. He was grinning with excitement. I could see him rushing back to camp to write the paper already. I pondered that for a while. Perhaps it was silly to be caught up in logical semantics. This, very likely, could be symbolic of an ASC. We each finished documenting our finds and began the hike back to camp. The downhill trek was rather pleasant and the sun was beginning to set, making for a comfortable warmth in the air. I wrapped my green bandana around Aaron's neck to protect from the lingering sun, and we took brief breaks for everyone to wander a few meters out and use the bathroom. We were about 30 minutes away from camp when Aaron heard nature's call, and I poked him for not being able to hold it in the short walk home. He laughed and returned back 5 minutes later with a shy smile at the waiting group. We continued back to camp, but I couldn't shake the feeling of foreboding that those depictions stirred in me. I'm an archaeologist, and I'm straight up not having a good time. Part 3. Let's get straight into that. I woke up on that final morning, utterly relieved to be going home the next day. There were too many weird things happening on this trip, and I yearned for the familiar. We divided the landscape up into 3 imaginary portions and paired up to do the final survey. Jess and I took the northeastern section. She would point out anything interesting, and I'd write it down and photograph it. This went on for hours, but neither of us seemed to mind. The sun was hidden behind some clouds today, making the air comfortably warm. The land was flat and easy to navigate. We even played some music through Jess's phone, and every now and then we'd break out into song. I found myself content for the first time on the trip. Professor Grant found us around 5 p.m. "Hey, you guys ready to come back to camp?" He was covered in a layer of sand, looking happy and in his element. Wow, time really did fly today. I was looking up at the setting sun. "Yep, time sure flies when you're having fun," he beamed. Jess and I rolled our eyes in unison. It seemed like a dangerous predicament to allow him to know we were having fun in the field. When we eventually got to camp, we all dispersed to our respective tents to do some packing. By the time I emerged, it was already dark out, and I contemplated some stargazing. Somehow, that became a tradition on final nights in the field. The camp is set up in such a way that there are expansive open lands for tents, but 2 little showers and a single toilet in a small dingy building at the far end of the grounds. They're supplied by the borehole on the site, so the water pressure isn't particularly great. I was in the shower, minding my own business and letting my thoughts wander when I thought I heard footsteps. "Hello?" I strained my ears to listen, but no one responded. I was about to chalk it up to my imagination when I looked down and saw 2 hiking boots, as if someone was pressed right up against my white shower door. I'm unembarrassed to say I screamed. Panic consumed me, and my heart was beating so fast I thought it was going to combust. I recognised the boots as being Darren's. "Darren, what the fuck?" But there was no response. I placed my ear closer to the door. I heard the heavy breathing from the other side. A sudden jolt in the door where my ear had been left me recoiling so far I was pressed up against the other side of the shower. "Hey Naya, it's me. Can we talk?" It was Jessie's voice. So exactly Jessie's voice. Her warmth, her cadence. It was all there. If I were to randomly hear that voice in class, I wouldn't have doubted for a second that it was Jess. But I knew it wasn't. "You aren't Jess!" I cried. A long pause. "Naya, open this door right now. We need to discuss your notes." This time it was Professor Grant's voice, so exact I almost considered opening it. When I didn't respond, there was a heavy sigh followed by "Clever girl" in a low, guttural voice I didn't recognise as belonging to anyone I knew. The boots finally moved away, and I heard the footsteps get softer and softer. I always considered myself a fighter, strong-willed and unwilling to let myself be victimised, but There's something about facing a threat naked and unarmed that leaves you feeling helpless. I don't know how long I crouched there, but when my heart started to finally slow down and logic set in, I knew I needed to get out of there. I quickly turned the water off, stepped out into an empty bathroom, pulled on my pants, shirt and shoes, and grabbed my phone. I traded off stealth for speed and walked so fast I was practically jogging back to camp. It was dark and I almost cried when I smacked headfirst into someone. "Hey, you okay?" I practically rushed into his arms in my panic and Aaron hugged me back hesitantly. There was something in the shower. It was Jess, and then it was Darren and Professor. Jess was in the shower? Jess has been asleep all afternoon. She said I should wake her up before dinner. No, it wasn't Jess. It wasn't anyone. I was frustrated and sobbing heavily at this point. He probably thought I was crazy, but pulled me in for another hug anyway. Shh, it's okay. He was gliding his hands along my back in an attempt to still me, but then I did something I promised myself I would never do: seek comfort in someone else. He kissed me back hesitantly at first, but then more enthusiastically, pulling me closer onto him. A blood-curdling scream snapped us out of our little moment, and I saw a second of irritation cross his face. I recognised that scream as Jess's, and I was running towards it, Aaron jogging behind me. Aaron caught up and was running ahead of me when he quickly turned around and I collided with his chest. "Don't look!" His voice was urgent, terror on his face, and he was shielding my eyes from the campsite. But I had to, and what I saw sent me hurling the contents of my stomach onto the floor. The massacre. It looked exactly like the massacre I'd seen on the rock art a day earlier. Limbs and blood. So much fucking blood. A sickly sweet smell in the air. I counted 5 bodies in total, which meant that scream was likely Jess's, and now she was alone and scared, somewhere in the fucking wilderness. We heard the rustling of the tall grass, and before I could react, Aaron was screaming at me to run, and we took off in the opposite wilderness. I was running faster than I ever had. My legs ached from the exertion, and my lungs couldn't seem to suck in enough air. And eventually, we stopped, and the silence of the night coated us like a blanket. "Naya! Aaron!" I heard Jess's frantic calls. Aaron was heading towards her when I yanked him back. "What?" His eyes were wild. "We don't know that's really her," was all I could choke out. "We can't just leave her if it is." His voice was urgent. I rubbed my temples, trying to think. "Stay here, Naya. I'll be careful, I promise." "No! We can't split up." "I promise." A gentle kiss on my cheek. And then he was gone, clouded by the dark. I sunk down in a squat in a feeble attempt at blending into the grasses. I crouched there for 5 minutes until my legs tired and I slipped. My hands groping the ground until I realised the floor to my right was wet. What the fuck? I grabbed my phone from my pocket and turned the flash on. The ground was coated in something dark. I followed it for a few meters and there he was, surrounded by tall grass, vacant eyes decaying from a hot day in the sun, still adorning the green bandana I had given him yesterday before he went to pee. The sight evoked a deep, throaty chuckle from me, and then I was laughing hysterically, tears streaming down my face. "You fucking idiot, Naya." It was Jess's second scream that then sent me running towards the danger. When my legs finally carried me there, it was chewing at the bloody mess of my friend. She was still alive, her eyes pleading with me to save her. It looked up and I was staring into my own eyes, but there was nothing there. No remorse, no empathy, no humanity. It raised its hand and waved, as if saying goodbye to a fond friend after a brunch date. Please, hear me when I say, I'm ashamed of the fact that I ran. I'm ashamed that I ran all the way back to camp, that I put Grant's car into first, then second, and then third. I'm ashamed that I drove away and that I never, even once, looked back. Wow. Absolutely awesome stuff there from the author Bleeding Dagger. I'll leave a link to their wonderful Reddit in the description box below. As ever though guys, Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments. Of course, please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. Again, if you have a story you'd like to share with us here on the show, or possibly think you can pen the next masterpiece, please do get that over to me at the website, which of course is www.dmtforesterfear.com. I hope you're all well and happy and enjoying a wonderful weekend with friends and family and good food. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.